Hello there, faithful viewer slash listener, and welcome back to a special episode of the Hit or Miss Doctor Who podcast. This is only going to be the second episode that we have released of the Hit or Miss Doctor Who. We experimented earlier in the year with our review of the Christmas special Joy to the World, and it seemed to be a success. So we are back with the full series as promised. The full series, of course, as we mentioned during that episode, is going to be dealing with all things Dalek related. We're going to be basically reviewing Dalek episodes and hopefully peppering a few Dalek things into the Hit or Miss sections. So that's all to look forward to. So this is a special episode, as I said. This is kind of basically our first re-upload, almost, in a way. I just thought to get you started on the Dalek series, we did actually do a review of the Peter Cushing movie, Doctor Who and the Daleks, over on our sister channel, Silver Screen Podcast. But if you haven't subscribed to that podcast, you might not know that we did that. And so I thought, why not use it as kind of a little amuse-bouche for the series, which is, I promise, coming next week. Starting just next week, we are going to be looking at the episodes, or the serial, I should say, the Dalek Invasion of Earth. It's a cracking episode. I'm just busy currently editing that now for everyone. It will be myself, DK, as always, the two hosts, joined by returning guest Will Templar, long time coming, and new guest Cliff Chapman, who are both fantastic guests, and it's going to be a bumper episode, probably be quite long, but we had a lot to say. And speaking of Will Templar, he's also on the episode you're about to hear. If you're listening for the first time, it's myself, DK, and Will. We're discussing, as I said, the Peter Cushing movie, Doctor Who and the Daleks. Originally, this was recorded to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who, so a couple of years ago now. We put that on our Silver Screen channel because it's a movie. So, yeah, hopefully you'll get something out of it. But don't panic if, obviously, when you start listening to the episode proper, it starts referring to itself as the Silver Screen podcast and we see some of those graphics and things. It's because that was where it was originally uploaded and where it still lives. But, as I said, why not give it another chance to get a little bit more of an audience here and to also whet our appetites for the Dalek treats to come. Before we get into that, though, I didn't want to just, give you a recycled thing. So it occurred to me that it's a chance, since I'm on my own here, to let you know what's to come in the upcoming series and maybe give you a little bit of backstory about me and my story with the Daleks. So first of all, let me just say that when the series starts, what you're going to be hearing at the start of every episode is going to be a little getting to know you section, in which I'll be asking everybody things such as their first exposure to Doctor Who, the first story they kind of loved that got them hooked, favorite classic and modern Doctor Who stories. These are all questions I've already answered, either on the Joy to the World episode or elsewhere, so I won't be going over that again. If you are interested, you can always go and check those out. But the one question that I will be asking everybody, which I will answer myself here shortly, will be, because of the obviously tie into the theme, what would be your favorite Dalek episode from all of them over the entirety of the series? So I'm hoping to get some good answers from people about that one, and I will chime in with mine in a second. But I will say, as well as that, we also have the Hit or Miss section, which we've been doing for our Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast for a while. But it's something to look forward to if you're a Doctor Who fan joining us brand new. Basically, we just throw out random things from anywhere in the universe, ask if they're a hit or a miss, debate it back and forth, and then come up to a consensus. So that's, you'll probably hear me describe it a few times on the episodes, but it's something to look forward to, just to give a little bit of extra to the episodes. And particularly if we're looking at, shorter episodes of Doctor Who, like the 45-minute episodes, it might give you a little bit more to look forward to on the episode, but it also just keeps the podcast being a little bit more exciting and a little bit more unique. And that's obviously where it gets its name from, being Hit or Miss Doctor Who. But don't worry, each episode of the podcast will also see a full, proper, in-depth review of a Doctor Who serial or episode or story, depending on kind of which era of the show we're looking at. And as I said, that's definitely going to be starting with the Dalek Invasion of Earth next week. So, oh boy, 6 25-minute episodes to deal with there, and as well as all the usual fun. So you've got all that to look forward to next week. And stay tuned. Obviously, we'll be dealing with a mixture of classic Doctor Who serials and modern Doctor Who episodes from the kind of post-2005 series. I won't spoil which ones, but there's some, you'll kind of know what to expect if you're familiar with the Doctor and the Daleks. I think there's not any huge shocks, although there might be a few things that we haven't yet had the courage to tackle that we might if this becomes hugely popular. But for now, for the next few weeks, we're definitely, we're knuckling down and we're going to do some Dalek stories. So to answer that question for me, because I'm going to be asking it to everybody else, it seems only fair, my favorite Dalek story, well, I'll be honest, I love them all. Well, with a couple of, minor exceptions. I'm looking at you, Destiny of the Daleks. But yeah, so I found it hard to choose. But what I did want to particularly shout out was if I have to pick a favorite, it's from the classic era. And it is a kind of story that I don't think gets a lot of love. Perhaps because it's a story that is entirely missing from the archives. Doctor Who fans will know what I mean when I say that. If you aren't familiar with this, again, apologies, Doctor Who geeks, if I try and explain this for any new listeners or viewers. Particularly, I think a lot of people that listen to this are kind of our American cousins who don't really know of why a lot of the earlier Doctor Who episodes aren't available to us. And essentially, just to give you a quick rundown, it amounts to the fact that nobody really knew at the BBC that there was going to be a legacy for these kinds of things, or that there would be. I mean, back in when it started in the 60s, there wasn't things like home media weren't dreamt of. We didn't even have videos, let alone DVDs or anything else. And it was considered that, blasphemy as it may sound, that these things didn't really have cultural impact beyond the first time they aired. So they would often be shipped overseas for repeat airings every now and then, make their way back to the BBC, and then be what they call junked. It would be literally just wiped to give you the tape space, basically, to use something else and re-record over it. And so a lot of early Doctor Who stories, almost all entirely from the first and second Doctor's eras, I will say. There was a couple of third Doctor ones missing that have since been recovered. But yeah, but an awful lot of those from 1963 to around 69 remain missing. And it's a shame. And yes, the story that I'm going to mention is one of them. It's a six episode, 6-part serial, and none of them have survived. But I will explain how I've kind of grown to love the story and the formats I saw it in. So without rambling too much further, the story in question is called The Power of the Daleks. That's what I would call as one of my favorites. It's famous for a couple of reasons, not just because it features the Daleks, which is always big, but also because it's kind of the very first post-regeneration episode. It originally aired right after William Hartnell regenerated into Patrick Troughton in the previous serial. It's also a Dalek serial that follows on from a Cyberman serial, which, again, fans will know the significance of. But, yeah, the sad thing is, like I said, all of the episodes were missing from the archives. But it was something that always intrigued me because we had, the odd picture, some clips. We could listen to the audio as we can with basically all of the episodes. So they kind of survive in a form or another, if you don't mind just listening to the what they call the off-air soundtracks, people who have basically recorded the episode on old-fashioned tape recorders because we didn't have any other means to do it. So people in the 60s would sit in front of their TVs apparently and record this, the actual episode audio on a cassette tape, and that's how a lot of the episodes have survived. So I think I did do that with Power of the Daleks, and I liked it. But what really brought it to my attention was when it was animated, which, again, they've been doing for a lot of these missing episodes in recent years, the Doctor Who kind of production team and the like, people that work on the show. And the animated version of The Power of the Daleks really brought it to life for me and really emphasized, I think, a lot of what the story was about and what it was trying to say. It was a much easier for me to follow, being more of a visual kind of, visual learner, I guess. And yeah, I think to give you a brief rundown, I don't want this to become a massively long preamble to the actual Doctor Who and the Daleks review, but I just think it's great. I like the way it's very subversive in the way that the Daleks kind of initially appear subservient and like they are almost slaves to the humans in the story. Something that was fantastically played with in the episode Victory of the Daleks, when they kind of called back to that with the Daleks, they seem like they're just our like nice, humble tea-serving helpers, but they're not. And what the other thing I like about that is that it means that we as the audience are one step ahead of the human characters, because we know they're the Daleks, they're the most evil thing ever, and the humans don't. And it also gives the new Doctor an advantage, and it gives you a chance to really accept, I think, Patrick Troughton as the Doctor, because it was, in my opinion, very smart to have this familiar of an enemy to face it and really reinforce, no, this is still the same Doctor. And it also means that him and his companions can be one step ahead of these humans. And we see the frustration as they try to convince them, like, no, these Dalek robot things, they're not to be trusted. There's going to be something that goes wrong. And I just think it's a great serial for all that intrigue and everything. There are some fantastic, iconic kind of sequences, Daleks on conveyor belts and attacking and invading, as well as the little sneaky ones that try and make out that they're friends, and the ones that hang around with the Dr. Lesterson and then eventually turn on him. Speaking of which, there's great characters like Lesterson and Bragan in the serial who, have lots of different roles to play, some sinister, some tragic, and it's actually a really well cast, I think, serial particularly for Classic Who, and all the guest characters and supporting characters get a lot to do, whilst not seeming like the episode is ignoring, the huge elephant in the room of this newly regenerated Doctor and us having to kind of explore what he can do, as well as the two companions, Ben and Polly, in this instance. So, yeah, I have to say, if you haven't checked out The Power of the Daleks, an animated version does exist, and I would say if you're kind of somebody that struggles, which I understand, with kind of off-air soundtrack stuff or reading the Target novelizations, I would recommend checking out the animated version of this story. I think it is even up on BBC iPlayer if you're in the UK for free. So, yeah, give it a watch and let me know what you think. I'd be curious to know, because I know a lot of people that like it but don't love it. But for me, it just really hit me, and I thought, I'm sad this is missing, but I'm really glad I got to see a version of it in this animated form, and I really, really like it. And it's one that I could watch, time and time again. And like I said, important episode for a lot of reasons. So, yeah, just give me your thoughts, as well as, if you want to, by the way, also share your favourite Dalek story or stories. You can give me a top 5 if you want, a top 10, anything like that. Just any engagement is great, and I'm happy to talk Doctor Who with anybody at any time. Also, feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions on Doctor Who and the Daleks, because that's what we're going to be ultimately here for. So, without any more further ado from me, I'm going to cross over to, I think, myself hosting this episode of the Silver Screen podcast. So, again, don't worry, it is on the Hit or Miss Doctor Who channel, but it's a previous upload from Silver Screen podcast. However, like I said, I thought it would be nice for posterity to keep it here for our review of Doctor Who and the Daleks. Enjoy. Hello there, Earthlings, and welcome back. And we are looking to this week our competition. I am joined, as usual, anyway, by our usual co-host, DK.
Hello, I am not Roberta Tovey.
I should really have said Dr. K or Dr. DK or something. And we are joined by our good friend from our fantastically, stupendously well-viewed Terminator review, and our other big Doctor Who fan, Will. Welcome back, Will Templar.
Oh, no worries. It's just another soft centre. I'm glad you got it.
That is DK's little name on the chat, is Soft Centres, and I thought it was you when he first entered, because I was like, only Will would make that kind of a silly joke.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't. So, if you haven't guessed by now, then we are going to be looking at the 1965 film Doctor Who and the Daleks. An adaptation of the very first Dalek serial from Doctor Who, because we are ostensibly a film podcast, so we're looking at the first big screen movie. Obviously, it's a British movie, still based on the series, but with a few changes that I'm sure we will get into. And yeah, this is the one that stars Peter Cushing as Doctor Who. No, Daleks, Doctor Who. That's one of the changes.
Who gave this man his sample back? For the love of God, I thought that was
that literally is all I've got. I just really wanted to do that. So, we're going to just sort of break down and discuss Doctor Who and the Daleks. Myself and DK have seen this many a time before. Will saw it for the first time, I think, a few hours before recording, so he'll have a much fresher opinion. But he's younger and hipper than us anyway. But, if you're new here...
He's younger. Let's leave it at that.
Well, there we go. If you're new here, you may not know this. If you're a regular viewer, you will. That we always start with a little behind-the-scenes section, little bits of information about the film. So I have tasked DK with doing that, because I know he's a big fan of this movie and of Amicus, the company that made it. So DK, it's over to you for the BTS.
Yes, I'll start with that. Saying thank you for the music upcoming. Peter Cushing was offered the role of the Doctor for this movie, as he was known to international audiences for his Hammer film work. William Hartnell, who played the Doctor, the original you might say, in the TV series, was reportedly very disappointed to be replaced by Cushing for the production. Ironically, Cushing was offered the role of the Doctor in the TV series on 3 separate occasions, but declined. He allegedly later regretted that decision. Now, as an incentive to Roberta Tovey, who is 11 at the time of filming, the director Gordon Fleming reportedly paid her $1, equivalent to around 5p for those of us who are not in an old folks' home, every time she did a scene in one take. She apparently made so much money, Fleming was reluctant to offer the same deal for the sequel. And for the modern day comparison, $1 from 1965 had the buying power of £1 now, or about $1.30. So, inflation, eh? Now, the Daleks were voiced by actor David Graham, who is best known among us nerd types for being the voice of Parker in Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds.
And Brains.
Brains is just nobody compared to Parker, dude. Parker's where it's at.
Fair enough.
This is arguably the first movie appearance of a lava lamp. They were invented in the UK in 1963 and deemed futuristic enough to be used in the Dalek headquarters. So when you next see Austin Powers, realise that the Daleks are responsible for so many atrocities. Peter Cushing was apparently a keen amateur florist and himself contributed the name Lilium Philadelphicum for the flower Susan discovers growing on Skaro. And at the time, although the backgrounds of the supporting cast were changed to make them more appealing to movie-going audiences, the Doctor, or Doctor Who in this context, was pretty much synchronous with the character seen in the TV series, that he was human, implied to have invented the TARDIS, and even referred to as Doctor Who. The revelations in the show that he was a time-travelling alien came later, explaining the inconsistency. It was planned to show one of the denizens of the Swamp of Mutations, but the prop constructed for the sequence was deemed too unconvincing to be used. In contrast, however, the writhing creature designed to be glimpsed inside a Dalek casing was judged too unsettling for the family audience the film was aimed at. This wasn't the only thing toned down either. Initially, the Daleks were going to shoot fire and the characters in the movie were going to more frequently scream, but after the script was sent to the BBFC, concerns were raised that these elements would be too frightening and not be suitable for a child-friendly movie, resulting in the fire from the weapons being replaced by CO2 fire extinguishers. Terry Nation's writing credit on the film resulted in many reference books over the years erroneously listing him as a creator of the original television series. So I'm sure he made a bit of pocket out of that. Speaking of which, this is the first of two Amicus Peter Cushing movies, the other being Dalek Invasion of Earth 2150 AD. There were plans for a third film, but those plans were abandoned after the underperformance of the 2150 AD sequel. Now, for years, it was speculated that a third film would have been based on the original series serial The Chase. However, papers uncovered by the sons of producer Milton Subotsky suggest a different take. While there was nothing concrete regarding an antagonist, it has been suggested that another creature could have been used in the third movie. Cybermen, Ice Warriors. It is possible that the third outing could have featured the Daleks once again. But the feeling was, especially after the poor performance of the second movie, that the Daleks were beginning to be seen as a little tired. So,
if I may put in here, I did hear something, and I'm not sure how true it is, but I did hear something that they were going to base it on The Chase, but it was going to be marketed as Daleks versus Mechanoids, and that would be the kind of thing they were going with to kind of lure people in. Was, oh look, not just the Daleks. Again, it could be wrong, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, as I said, it's been speculated for some time. What could have been featured? Well, the provisional title for the third film, and make of this what you will, was Doctor Who's Greatest Adventure, and would have repurposed an old horror movie script whose original title was Night of the Crabs. So, yeah. I don't know what you're going to make of that.
The jokes just write themselves sometimes, don't they?
Yeah, and even more intriguing, the notes for the script would have seen the Doctor coming face to face with himself. According to reports, it would have seen actually two Doctors, a younger and an older version, which is interesting as it would have preempted 1973's Three Doctors by several years. I'm not sure how they would explain that away, but it's movies, so there you go. There were also plans during the late 60s for a radio serial continuing the adventures of Cushing's Doctor, with Cushing voicing the character. A pilot was recorded, Journey into Time, with he and his granddaughter travelling to the time of the American Revolution. It was written by future TV show writer Malcolm Holt, and a further 52 episodes were planned. Sadly, the idea never took off, and the recording of the pilot was unfortunately lost. However, this is not the last we would see of the Cushing incarnation of the Doctor. For those who couldn't get enough of this iteration of the character, if you can find it, the BBC Books 2000 anthology Short Trips and Sidesteps featured the story The House on Old Dark Moor by Justin Richards, which would continue the adventures of this Doctor. In the years since, Obverse Books have published a series of unofficial books for charity featuring further adventures of this version of the Doctor taking over from the radio serial that never aired. The Stephen Moffat 2018 novelisation of The Day of the Doctor also features a reference to the movies. So despite there being only 2 movies initially, Cushing's Doctor resonated enough with fans who have now become creators that he still continues on in one form or another to this day. And back to you, fella.
Nice. Yeah, I'm pleased you mentioned that about the Stephen Moffat thing, because I have the novelisation of Day of the Doctor that he wrote. And it actually stems from an interview that I saw with him where he did say he tried to work the movies into the actual Day of the Doctor episode. He was going to have movie posters in the Black Archive that the Doctor visits in Unit and have it implied that Peter Cushing was a real actor who was acting out, the things that the Doctor had lived, and that explained the differences. So they existed as movies in universe, but unfortunately, different companies, etc., they weren't allowed the rights to do that. So he corrected that when he came to write the book, and I personally like to believe that, yeah, if he was going to do that, let's just assume that. Why not? So,
yeah, from what I read, both the 10th and 11th Doctors were fans of and friends with Cushing.
Yes,
and
yeah.
Unit began investigating it because he kept releasing movies even after he was dead. So Amicus at that point was probably overtaken by Disney.
Most likely, yeah. It's strange that they were rumoured for a time to have a movie based on The Chase as well, since that briefly turns into a Hammer horror film out of nowhere.
Well, was it a Hammer horror film or was it Carry On Screaming?
Well, it was kind of Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, at least, I guess, yeah. Anyway. So, yeah. Any thoughts from you, Will, about any of that? Is that news to you? Anything exciting popping out to you?
Well, it's all new to me. Nothing really to say about it, but yeah, very interesting.
Awesome. I did have one other thing I wanted to add that was kind of behind the scenes related. Well, a couple of things. First of all, as I was watching the interviews and things on the Blu-ray that I've got, one of the things that came up was that obviously the Daleks were massively popular, so this movie had a premiere at Cannes, and apparently at one point John Lennon was scared by 3 Daleks. To which I've just written, that has to have been the most 1960s headline you'll ever see. John Lennon terrified by Daleks. Anyway.
Dude probably had a flashback. Thought you were tripping still back in India.
Peace and love. Oh, don't do that. Yeah. I'll get into some other changes and things, but suffice to say that when the film came out, it was not a commercial. It was not a critical hit. Sorry, the critics really savaged it, especially in the US. But it was a commercial hit, and as you say, fan groups and us nerds have kind of kept the love for it alive. So that's why it still prevails to this day. And if you haven't seen it and you're a Doctor Who fan, I recommend giving it a go.
Well, it's available nowhere, pretty much. Unless you get physical.
Well, it used to be on TV all the time when we were younger. It was the sort of thing that you would see on like Saturday afternoons and things.
But that's why I had that conversation with you, how you're not going to see classic stories on mainstream TV. And I know you said, oh, what about the Daleks colorization? I was like, yeah, because that's colorization cut down. You're not going to get a black and... Well, it's not black and white, but you're not going to see these films on like BBC One, are you? Because
but I didn't say it would be on BBC One. I said they would show it on BBC 4 because they'd already been doing that.
But they haven't been. They haven't.
Yeah, they have.
Well, not for the last.
They definitely have fairly recently. I mean, well, I say recently, it was probably 10 years ago because it was for the 50th anniversary. But yeah,
it'd be great if it was brought back because it was on Amazon, but then they got rid of it recently.
I don't see them going along
universe thing. Perhaps they're waiting for that.
I'm not sure if they would have the rights, but it would be nice if it gets added, the 2 films, to the new like Hooniverse section on the iPlayer. I suppose. Keep our fingers crossed because there's some things that are still yet to work their way over there that are coming.
I have no idea how ITV have rights to it though. For ITVX, that's how I watched it.
That's the kind of place we used to always see it. Yeah.
It's the rights are kind of all over the place because it was Amicus, which has obviously since then disappeared. It's just been revived this year by another film studio. But I believe the rights reverted to Warner Brothers because they ended up using the Daleks from the Dalek movies in Looney Tunes Back in Action.
Right, okay.
They were apparently residents of Area 51.
Yeah, that was one of the cameos. I forgot to say as well, though, it should be noted that the movie Daleks are obviously different from the TV Daleks, but the movie Daleks actually first appeared on TV because the production borrowed some of them for the filming of the chase. So their actual first appearance was when the chase aired, which came out before the movie. That's neither here nor there. We're not here to talk about, well, we are kind of here to talk about classic Doctor Who because a lot of it feeds in, not least because a lot of the story of Doctor Who and the Daleks, I have to say, is pretty much beat for beat the same as the TV version of the serial, to the point where when watching, I was kind of thinking it's very generous of Milton Subotsky to give himself a screenwriting credit for essentially just chopping a few pages from Terry Nation's existing script. That's not for me to debate, and fair play. You get paid, man, if you did the work or whatnot. So yeah. I did want to ask a couple of questions before we jump into the review. Can you remember the first time, DK? We don't need to ask Will this. What was the first time you watched the movie? Because we know it was a few hours ago. But can you remember the first time you saw it and what kind of impact it had on you the first time?
Not with any great specifics. I just know I was very young, and I remember it kind of blew my mind, so to speak. My parents used to sit me in front of the TV and watch all the classics like the original Star Trek, and back then it was Wonder Woman, Linda Carter, and all that kind of stuff. So they tried me in Doctor Who, and as we were saying earlier, I think they showed this every second month or every bank holiday on the BBC. Yeah. So. Yeah,
I always saw it on ITV or Channel 4, to be honest. I can remember seeing it a lot with that.
I could be mistaken with that. I mean, there were only 3 channels back then. So, it was... I can't remember any specifics, but I could just remember really liking it. And I really identified with Ian, hence the avatar, simply because I knew Roy Castle from Record Breakers.
I knew that was going to come up. That's great.
Yeah. So, to see him, it was kind of something to latch onto,
Yeah. It's weird how they kind of have British celebrities in both of these, because then Bernard Cribbins obviously turns up as the companion in the sequel as well. So, long before doing a modern Doctor Who. But fair enough. I can't really remember the first time I saw this film, because again, like you, it kind of blurs. But I know it was definitely on television. And it would have been obviously after I was like 14, 15. So I probably was quite late to it compared to most. I can only assume it was like a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. And it was on, like I said, ITV or Channel 4, because I was actually born on the exact same year that the 4th channel launched. So unlike some of you, DK, I didn't live through the 3-channel period. So,
I do remember we got a video player, and it's that long ago that it was actually a Betamax, not a VHS. And when I got into Doctor Who, there were only 2 Doctor Who tapes, and one was Revenge of the Cybermen, and the other was this. So when I was a kid, even when it wasn't on, my dad used to rent this from the store, and I would watch this repeatedly.
Ah, nice. I do have that with some films, but just not with Doctor Who and not with this. I've only ever really owned it on Blu-ray recently. But although I am interested in the 4K restoration, I'm told it's very good. And obviously, with bright colours and cool sound, I can imagine it would be. So if it comes down in price, maybe someday. We'll wait and see. But yeah, just to remind the audience as well, then, like I said, we're going to be comparing as we go this to the original serial, because it's kind of inevitable. But you can watch a cut-down, colorized version of that, which will be coming on BBC4 as we finish our podcast when you're listening. So again, we can't compare to that version, but it'll be interesting to see what they deem unnecessary and cut out in the same way that the movie did. And I think that's all of the random rambles out of the way. So let's get into talking about the movie. And I've been dying to come to this first of all, Will, and to ask you, you just saw it for the first time. So just overall, as spoiler-free as possible, what were your overall thoughts when you sort of first finished the movie about it?
So I spoke to you, I liaised with you, and I didn't like the first hour as much as the second half, whereas you liked the first half but not the second. Did I butcher that?
I wouldn't say that. I would say that to me it felt like it started to drag a little bit in the last half hour, when it was just very much we're doing the whole Dalek run around, and I'm kind of sorry.
That was where the big budget came into play in the final half hour with more of the set pieces. Like in the end, let's talk about the end, for example, when the Daleks come out and they're when they were sneaking up on the files and whatever when they were about to storm the Dalek city, and they just like open up the ground and it's just like this white vibrant LED light, and I just thought that's so unnecessary, but it looks awesome. So it's just like,
it looks great.
Just gripped my attention more so than the first half hour, whereas like it's very much like what the original TV serial was. We're going through familiar grounds, and by the time they were like imprisoned, I was like, I've seen this beat for beat. I'm bored now.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but for me, I just got annoyed because a lot of the stuff that they do add, which, as you say, sometimes it might be because it looks good, you know, now that you have color and you're going to be on the big screen, but a lot of it just seemed perfunctory and pointless. Like when they open that thing that you mentioned, like Tracy Island, and there's a big shining light, or the Thals like try to shine mirrors to fool the Daleks, and it works for like 0.6 seconds, and it's like, well, that was pointless. And just little silly changes, like we mentioned earlier, like DK alluded to the idea that they try to go through the lake of mutations, which never comes to anything because they couldn't actually afford to show you anything. So some guy just dies from something off screen. And then, as I was discussing with you earlier, Will, I just hate the moment of it takes away all of the dramatic pathos when they're trying to get across the caverns and stuff. And that guy does the whole, oh, I'm going to cut this rope and sacrifice myself to save everyone else. And in the TV serial, it's actually a really powerful moment, and you know, you can feel the guilt and the guy dies and everything. And then in the film, for whatever reason, maybe because being kiddie friendly or whatever, it's just like, I'm cutting this rope, I'm gonna fall. Oh, never mind, there's a handy ledge here, pull me back up.
Yeah,
like, that entire scene is pointless.
That's why I meant is like it doesn't dwell on the moments. For example, when the Thal looks up at Ian, he's not really struggling, he's being pulled up, but he still decides to cut it anyway. Like it doesn't build up the anticipation well at all. It just like happens out of nowhere. And then you think, what the hell has he done? He's just killed himself for no reason. And then like have a cutaway and then cut back to him and it's like, oh, he's alive. And I was like, that is utterly pointless. And it's because that's the first time I think it dipped into the absurdity of the actual absurdity of Doctor Who, like the TV show, in terms of something you wouldn't.
I would say that's one of the few things that the serial actually does better than the movie. Well, I said that moment is played a lot better in the TV show.
Well, that cave scene in general is like a whole serial and a half in the TV show, whereas it's like 5 minutes.
Oh yeah,
in the film. Mercifully.
Oh yeah, I mean overall, yeah, fair enough, definitely. But yeah, okay. Any thoughts, DK, about you know, changes along those lines that were made? And did you have a point where the film kind of got a bit maybe boring for you, or you one bit that you liked more than the other?
It's weirdly enough how one of you likes the start, one of you likes the ending.
I didn't say
like the middle.
It is. There's a kind of lull in the middle for me where sometimes if I'm not careful, I can actually, you know, just start drifting off. Which, you know, I could put that down to my
age.
One
of those films, yeah. It's one of those films, to be fair, where you've seen it enough times. It is comfort blanket type thing where there is a risk of really drifting off. Yeah.
It is. It's like when you slap an old episode of Next Generation on or something. You just sat there. It's nice and warm. You're watching it, and the next thing you know, you're late for a recording.
Next thing you know, you're waking up after having dreams of being exterminated by fire extinguishers. Yeah. So I'll bring that up actually because it's just come into my head now. That was one of the things that kind of bugged me as well. Was they did mention, okay, they weren't allowed to use flamethrowers, which was their original intention because obviously health and safety, and it's not kiddie friendly. And they apparently
when they burned down the door.
Oh, they do, but it's only one, and it's like it's specifically called in to break through the door, whereas it would have been like that's what every Dalek would have been shooting flame. But yeah, supposedly the director Gordon Fleming had said that they did try, or they did look at doing the effects like the TV show, but no laser effect didn't look like ridiculously cheesy. And then when they tried the whole negative effect that they do on TV, it didn't work at all. So yeah, as a result, you have that really stupid. They're just walking around spraying fire extinguishers out of their guns.
Yeah. I mean, in black and white, it does look fantastic. I love that original effect. I love it brought back, actually. Whereas with color, maybe it does look a little bit shit. We just don't know.
Well, yeah. With what you were capable of in 1965, I don't blame the director or anything at all. It's just a shame that... I don't know. It's just a shame they couldn't have tried a little better, because for me, I don't think the spraying of CO2 does work. It never feels all that threatening, especially when you see... I know it happens in the TV show, but when you see it sprayed on Ian and all it does is, oh, my legs have gone dead for a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's not very, very terrifying, but yeah.
I thought it could have differentiated a bit with like perhaps the color of it, perhaps add some steam in terms of like having a difference between stunning someone and killing someone, because like when it got sprayed at the files, for example, I was like, come on, get up, it's just your legs like broken. Stand up, you're just stunned, mate. You're not dead. But then it turned out to be dead. I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's very weird, like that. But again, it's kind of like I said, it was appealing, I think, more or trying to appeal to a kid market, and it was riding this wave, which is something else I wanted to ask about actually, because I'm not really old enough to remember, and I don't think even you are, DK, the whole Dalekmania craze. But I don't think you can really talk about this film without talking about Dalekmania, because it is a result of it, and it definitely was at the absolute crest of that wave where, everybody was obsessed with Daleks. Like, you could argue the only reason Doctor Who's still on is because of the Daleks, because of their, they were the second multi-part serial to have aired, and that was the one that captured everyone's imagination. And yeah, the world went Dalek crazy. They make some fantastic documentaries and films about it, which I do recommend watching. But so DK, are you kind of like aware of that? Was that something that was still going on when you were, coming to this film, or aware of Doctor Who?
I wasn't aware of Dalek. The only thing that brought it up to me is I was working at WH Smith during the release of the Dalekmania documentary, and they brought out like some kind of big box set with it, and I had no idea until that point, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, in some respects, and I'm probably going to get flayed alive for this, but in some respects, I think it has been as much of a detriment to Doctor Who as it has been, a bonus, simply because of the fact that, that thing where we just have to include Daleks in every series, pretty much. I could do without that a lot of the time. They're good, but they can be overused sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, that's a different debate in terms of the TV series, but I do think, personally, I think it's kind of silly to say that you don't want to do anything with them, because they were that popular for a time. Like, Dalekmania was named after Beatlemania. People were going crazy. They were buying any merchandise, and they were huge. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I don't think it's the audience necessarily like, oh, they just got sick. I think, you could, and I don't think personally I ever get sick of the Daleks. I always love, there's a reason these films exist, and they do still keep reappearing. And I think they are kind of the primary appeal of the film, because when you look at it, even the posters and things, there's no sign of Peter Cushing on them at all.
No one cares about that doddering old guy reading the Eagle. They want these brightly coloured things shooting CO2 at everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And but the posters, the full colour posters of like just all Daleks everywhere, and there's hundreds of them and stuff. And
I think it appealed to kids, because unlike the TV series, they were in colour back then, and they weren't just in colour; they were in full colour. You had the reds and you had the blue ones, and I'm not being funny. I'm not being disrespectful to the characters that died in the story and stuff like that. But it was every kid's dream to just get inside of a Dalek casing and take it for a spin.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you remember. They'd probably gone by the time you were around, because you're a freaking whippersnapper too. But when you used to go into amusement arcades on the coast, they used to, those like rides that they have outside shops where you put 5 pence in and you go on like a little ride.
Oh yeah.
They used to have a Dalek one.
Oh wow.
You used to go in, sit inside the Dalek, and it had got like a glass screen, which you presume was the Dalek vision, and you could move the eye stalk around and you could move the arms, and it would just like spin and shout exterminate and stuff like that. And kids just love that kind of stuff. So I can understand why they appealed so much.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely recommend, if you have a chance, to watch the Dalekmania documentary. It was packaged as its own thing for a while, but I think in fact, I know it's a special feature on the Blu-ray that you can get of the movie of Doctor Who and the Daleks now, because it's like an hour-long documentary, but it's fascinating because a lot of the toys and things they make are just so lame looking to us now. Like, they would never fly, but everyone was just like, oh, it looks enough like this thing that we love. And, they had inflatable ones and little corgi toy ones and all sorts. It's, just fascinating to watch the impact that it had.
I used to have a red Dalek, a red toy Dalek, that when you press the button down on the top, it would scream exterminate.
I don't doubt that for a minute.
The eye stalk and the arms had all broken off. It was just like, a screwball thing with with batteries that didn't really work anymore.
Yeah, it's weird though, because I think it's a very generational thing. Like, Will, were you aware of this like level of Dalekmania, or is it just the sort of thing where now you're like, oh, the Daleks are appearing all the time, and I'm sick of it. We don't want to watch them, kind of thing.
Well, I knew the Dalekmania thing was a thing in the 60s, of course, because of like Phil Collins we're hearing it.
You were watching the movie, did you think, oh, the Daleks, why didn't they have a different enemy? Or were you like, oh, cool, Daleks? You know?
Well, if I'm watching a film called Doctor Who and the Daleks and there were no Daleks, I would be bitterly disappointed.
Well, yeah, obviously, but I mean, like, for Doctor Who's first big screen type thing, does part of you think, why didn't they
what else
adapt?
Would they do?
I don't know.
Fucking monoids.
No. Just going to say, I was going to say, why were you like, oh, I was hoping to watch Doctor Who in the Void or whatever.
No.
And who wouldn't?
Commercial appeal.
But yeah, I mean, by this point, they hadn't even invented the Cybermen or anything. But yeah, it's just amazing to me. Anyway, that's just me in terms of like the Dalek. Like I say, I find it fascinating from a cultural standpoint, just how huge it is and how that design is largely unchanged from 1963 when it debuted. And yeah, we can talk about the changes to the movie one, but it is essentially recognizably the exact same thing. And if you look at it objectively, it is kind of daft. I mean, sink plunger, a whisk.
They have lasted. I mean, they're pretty much synonymous now. When even these days, when someone mentions Doctor Who, the first thing that people normally go to is the Daleks.
Yeah, precisely. And I think you couldn't, you mentioned the word Dalek to anybody in the street, whether they've watched the show or not, and they'll all go, EX-TER-MI-NATE, because it's, cultural zeitgeist, isn't it? It's just one of those things. They've done, TV adverts for everything from radio rentals to Hamlet cigars and stuff. So
I remember a Heineken advert, I believe.
Really? Okay, yeah. Weird. But yeah, it's just weird how this design captured the imagination. But again, I don't want to go too far into that. It's just worth noting because this is like
in the film. I'm just going to point it out there now. I think we're all going to mention it, but I may as well bring it up now. The lights on the Dalek top, they pissed me off.
I was going to mention that. Yep, absolutely.
I was going to mention that actually if it came up as well.
Yeah, and it was like if they spoke, then the lights wouldn't go off continually. It would be when they spoke. Whereas the ones in the background that don't talk, they just go off anyway. And I just thought,
yeah, Fleming, I've got it here. He says he didn't originally realize that the Daleks' dome lights only flash in synchronization with their speech. Consequently, he had them randomly pulsed to make their scenes more interesting, which caused problems for Milton Subotsky. When the film was assembled in post-production, editing the footage meant that he had to severely rewrite some dialogue to fit the flashes, which resulted in unavoidably staccato delivery for the creatures on occasion.
Yeah, it's David Grimm, I feel for, because it's trying to fit that into random flashes when, you've got 4 words and 17 flashes, go. But yeah, I do mention that in my conclusion. I'm sure I'll get to it later. But yeah, I think from a nerd level as well, I just think the dome lights are too big. Even though I know that's really petty, but I'm just like, yeah, too big. Don't like it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. But I mean, in terms of anything else, there's not really that much changed, except like you said, I do think the color really works for them. Like, I don't know how many people watching the black and white one cared about that kind of thing, but I do think it was a wise choice to have, like you said, blue and red, bright red and black, and the differentiated red leader and stuff that would eventually come into the TV show as it got into color. Because, imagine if they'd all just been gunmetal grey, it would have been a bit boring when you're marketing the film as Technicolor Marvel. And yeah, I think it works.
When I went from the movie to the TV show, I thought the Daleks looked so dull.
I like them, don't get me wrong. It's amazing.
They're okay. I mean, they're never going to be on a parade on Broadway. They are essentially Nazis. So, gunmetal grey is the way to go. But when you come to that from bright Technicolor stuff like that, it does come across on occasion like a bit of a downgrade.
I have to disagree. I think they've never been more menacing than their first ever serial. My profile picture, that moment in episode 1 or 2, I think it's episode 1, where Barbara is trapped. I'm so glad they didn't replicate that in the film, actually. Because there was a moment where they would all the doors were closing, like in the first 20 minutes. And I was like, okay, this is going to be like the cliffhanger where the Dalek comes in, is trapped them all, and then it just never came. I was like, that's really disappointing because
it's a very fine line though, because you say it looks terrifying. I say it's somebody waving a sink plunger at an actress. Do you know what I mean?
Sure, but it's an iconic moment, and
yeah.
if you buy into the world, it does work, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. Maybe they tried it and it just didn't. But I think they got very lucky there, and Jacqueline Hill's performance and the fact that it's black and white and atmospheric, and whoever it was that directed the serial pulled off a really iconic shot, and it is great. But like I said, you do run the risk if you try and replicate it of looking like why somebody waving a sink plunger at this actor, which is a bit iffy. Yeah. Anyway, but no, I think in terms of the technicalness of the Daleks, I think it also kind of it lends the film an air of belonging to that like 50s and 60s sci-fi pulp type thing that you saw. Like a lot of this film reminds me of things like Forbidden Planet and stuff out of America, where it's, you know, some people might call it cheesy or camp. Some people would just call it high fantasy or, you know, sci-fi that wasn't particularly well regarded. But I think this film fits into bits like that really well, and I wasn't sure if that you guys would agree or not that it's sort of because it wasn't popular in the States, so maybe I'm wrong, but do you guys kind of see a link there or not?
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
There's not much to build off that. No, can't say anything.
Okay. Well, quickly, because we haven't really talked about it yet, so we will talk about the changes to the kind of central idea of the show, because just to push back to all the nerds that have probably been shouting for the last like few, whatever it is, half an hour since you did the BTS, I will say, DK, they do mention that the Doctor's from another planet in literally the pilot. I don't know where your information came from, but yeah. So the idea that he was a human being and Doctor Who was his name is kind of new. The whole Doctor Who thing is debatable, because there are moments in the show where they sort of indicate that it is a name. People will always point to the war machines and things like that, but certainly it's never made as explicit as it is here. Nobody ever calls the Doctor Who in the way that Roy Castle bandies it about every 2 minutes here, in a way that feels really weird. And then if you're like me, you start wondering, hang on, does that mean that the other two are called Susan Who and Barbara Who? Is it an actual surname? What's going on with this?
I mean, they have Susan, who's a very childlike actor, a very childlike character in Doctor Who in terms of in the actual TV show. And in the film, they actually have her played by a child. So she's acting her age. I feel so bad for Caroline Falls. Watching this film, she must have been like, my characterization is literally that of a child. And it also with a child, actually. And I thought she was actually...
You say that, but at least her character got some characterization. Barbara does absolutely nothing in either version of the story. So, you know.
I mean, William Hartnell decides to have a rest in 2 episodes. He's just like, yeah, I'm poisoned. I'm going to sleep here.
Well, that's what they did in the classic series. It was like, oh, you've got to have a holiday, so disappear from the plot for 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Over them bringing up the premise of like why they have to go into the sea and stuff like that, which is largely unchanged from the TV show. I did like how we got to see like the fluid lake. I think in the TV show it was only like hypothetical. We didn't see what the problem was.
Right.
I don't know why he took.
Definitely saw the
city, but yeah.
You definitely saw the petrified jungle and everything, but
of course,
yeah, because like I said, it was very much like, oh, we've still landed in the same place and it's all the same, and Daleks and dolls and blah blah. But again, it's kind of Anyway, for me, this just maybe it's because I didn't come to I came to it from a point where the TV show had developed this lore, but for me, it just is jarring that this is just like a random dude who has invented a time machine in his backyard, which is bigger on the inside, and it's just kind of like I can't reconcile this. It seems too bizarre and outlandish, and it's just kind of like, so it's a human old dude invents a time machine, doesn't tell anybody or anything, and it's like my head is blown. I have to have that lore. And is that just me? Do you guys find yourself not bothered by it at all? Or?
I'm not bothered by it, but I think from around that time, if you've seen some Roger Corman movies, you could take anything on face value. So when you came into this, as I say, I think this was the first experience with Doctor Who and all that kind of thing. So I kind of took that on board. When you then watch the TV show and come back and you have all that baggage, you kind of see it almost as some kind of, I don't know, Wish.com version.
See, I'm the opposite. I would say the film comes off like that because it just seems like They don't.
No, that's what I'm saying. I said once you've watched the TV series and you have that baggage, from, as you say, the end of the second Doctor on, that he's 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 not really from Gallifrey anymore, but he's got two hearts and all that kind of stuff. And then you come back to this. This very much seems like a kind of Poundland version of Doctor Who, if you know what I mean. And I think
completely.
Does it almost a disservice?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, they took the grandfather thing so seriously. I thought he was going to start making racist jokes. So I was like, yeah, that's the one way to make him like a proper grandfather, isn't it? But yeah, they took that really seriously. They made Susan a child, which is a very ballsy move, and they made Ian a complete arse. So I think they did do the characters an injustice, in my opinion. And when you lack of development as well, like you said, Michael, with Barbara.
Oh, completely. I mean, Barbara is completely pointless in the movie and in the serial. Like I said, she's there to scream on a couple of occasions. But it's weird, because I was going to say, to me, it kind of jars that they don't bother explaining little things like why is TARDIS, which, by the way, isn't named the TARDIS, which again bugs me.
For me, yeah.
But why is it like bigger on the inside and stuff? And they don't even give an explanation, because I think it's one of those sci-fi-ish type movies where part of you is just supposed to think magic or whatever, like wonder, or don't even worry about it.
Point, doesn't he? And Susan gives like a one-line answer, which is the equivalent of Star Trek's technobabble, and then it's never kind of dwelt on again.
Yeah, but I kind of, like I said, I prefer the TV series' thing about dimensionally transcendental, and we have this kind of level of technology and science because we might even be from the future. Who knows? When it's just a doddering old granddad has invented a time machine and broken the laws of dimensionality and stuff in his backyard. I mean, I get it, because you have to get to the story, and you're adapting the second serial as well as having to do the things that the very first pilot episode does. So, and audiences probably would have been like, get to the Dalek planet or whatever. So I get it, but yeah, it is just jarring, because like you said, it feels like, you can tell from the marketing and everything as well, it feels a lot like they're just like, well, we need to have Doctor Who there to get there, I guess, but then we don't really care about the character all that much. Anyway, certainly that's how it came off with me. In terms of what you were mentioning, like characterization, yes, I think there's way too much slapstick kind of nonsense at times. Sometimes it's fun, and sometimes you're just like, all right, come on, dude. You could take something seriously. But I get it. Again, it's Roy Castle. He's an entertainer, and it's funny. He's pulling it off. But what really jarred was that, like, most people would consider this like an alternate first Doctor, and yet the Doctor Who character doesn't act anything like William Hartnell. Like, he's if anything, he's probably closer to the Patrick Troughton version. He's constantly like impish and wandering around and yes, and like, I'm like, he's like Willy Wonka when he should be like the grumpy, like, sure, don't do that kind of thing.
But I think they were going for a more child-friendly, kind of aspect to it. That's and I think that explains the slapstick as well. I mean, you've got to look at it this way. Subotsky and Amicus were well known at this point for doing horror movies. Yeah. So when you're going to switch and do a child-friendly movie, and especially around that time, when in the 60s, you got your carry-on movies and all that kind of thing. But, obviously this didn't do well in the States, but in England at least, you've got that kind of like cheeky humor. And I think in order to get it closer to family fun, they're going to inject a lot of kind of things for the kids, basically. And I think what would look like a misanthropic old bastard as a doctor, I don't think that would work. So I think they were, I don't mind Cushing's character in this.
Here's the thing: by the time this film was coming out, you were getting towards like William Hartnell's final series and whatever and stories, and I think by that point, by season 3, he was far more joyful and cheerful and much more like the movie portrayal, because you in series 3 you have like serials like the war machines, you have the gunfires, serials where he's like really joyous and like full of life.
The Daleks, this is a weird thing, but again, it's quite nitpicky. The Daleks point out that the prisoners are intelligent and dangerous, but they're going to keep them alive because they might be useful. And I'm just like, this seems an awful lot like, you're keeping them alive because the plot's demanding it. And then as soon as they do escape and there is a threat, it's like, now you can kill them. Oh yeah, now you want them dead, that they've actually kind of mucked you over, you know? I do like the scene, and I think it's in the TV show as well, where, you know, they ambush the Dalek, you know, working out that they're using static electricity, and they ambush it and then take the creature out of the case, which is really cool when you see the glimpse of the claw. You know, it's good that the film remembers that, you know, they're cyborgs. There's a living creature in there, and then you get the cool scenes of Ian riding around in the Dalek casing and then getting stuck, and the Daleks breaking through the door. I really liked all that. I thought that was played for the perfect level of tension, and again, for me, I think does it better than the TV show manages from memory, because I'd never felt that level of like, oh, countdown, he's going to get exterminated, they're going to bust through, and you know, the cool moment when you see them shoot at the Dalek casing and you think he's gone, and then nope, the elevator's moving, so he's on the lift and he's up there with them, you know.
I did wonder if that was just written in, like the elevator bit where he couldn't get into the elevator was written just because the set was like faulty, because they didn't get the lip of the lift right with the set. I thought that could be.
Oh no, I think it's from the original story. It's just one of those things where, like I said, it's to give you that extra little bit of peril, but. I mean, obviously the lift doesn't look fantastic. It's, you know, 1965 film set, but I was still, you know, I was more drawn into that point than I was in some other moments. I do like as well that the Daleks, just like in the TV show, are so petty that when they realize they can't get out and you know, survive on the planet, their solution is fine, atom bomb the whole place. Then if we can't get out there, nobody's getting it. You know, it's like, geez, man, Daleks are a bit angry, whatever. Yeah, and I think I've mentioned a few other things. That was the other, related to what I was saying earlier, there's a line where the Dalek actually says to Doctor Who, "We do not believe you are capable of making such a machine," and I've just written, yeah, me neither. But he did, you know. And just one quick thing I want to get into. What are your thoughts on that? I'm going to throw it open to you two. This idea of like, oh, they're pathetic pacifists. You can't do that. You've got to fight. You'll fight for something when I threaten your woman or whatever. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it was a different time back then. We'd only been, 20 years outside of World War II, where the prominent thing was, you know, you had to fight for your country. You had to fight for this. You had to fight for that. It was seen as very much a patriotic duty, whereas now it's more a case of, oh, you know, I don't want no part of that. So the one thing where, you know, he goes over and takes the Thal woman and, you know, provokes him into saying, see, you will fight for something. It's just very much of its time. Like I said, I class it alongside those Carry On movies I mentioned earlier.
I don't get bothered by that because, like you said, it's of the time and I kind of get what they were going for. But there's a little moment later where it's like indicated that whatever his name is, Aladdin or Aladdon, has now changed so much that when one of the Thals is trying to be cowardly, he gives him a slap. And I'm like, all right, come on. You were saying the same thing like 20 minutes ago. Come on, dude.
Well, at that point, you just imagine Miguel Ferrer from Hot Shots Part 2 saying, "War, it's fantastic."
I have changed my mind. Yeah. Fighting is definitely the best thing.
What is this? This is awesome. Give me a break.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, I do love your obscure film references at times, Deacon. Yeah. I just said, related to what you were saying about how I didn't like again, I wouldn't say I didn't like the end part, but I like it less. To me, again, when I look at my notes, I've just written that it's very much like we're running around, we're getting captured, we escape, and it goes like in a loop. And I'm like, all right, the TV show does this a lot, especially when it's got like 6 or 7 episodes to pad out, sorry. But like, I think you kind of hinted this as well, Will. It's amazing that all of those scenes towards the last half hour still somehow feel plodding, even though it's, you know, it's 10 minutes instead of about 50 compared to the TV version.
No, I disagree. I said vice versa. You said the end meanders a little bit.
Yeah.
I
still found that plodding, yeah. And you did say you found it boring, but you said that at the start of the film rather than the end, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because at the start you have a lot of the same beats, you have like the plot's exactly the same, whereas in the latter half, and I think this is in the original serial, but I think it's done far better here. It's when they climb the mountain and then they have the like really beautiful establishing shot of the city. I thought that had such better payoff in this film. And in the cave scene, mercifully short. So I think I don't really see a problem with it. I think it was a breezy like half hour.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And worth noting that you obviously do think the production value, which you would expect, is better than what the TV show managed. So it's much more impressive. The Skaro city and the Daleks and the vistas and things like that. Which again, I completely agree with. By the way, I think it's. But again, you'd expect that it's a big screen film budget compared to, BBC Studio H or whatever it was they were doing.
I mean, I think like the climax of this film, I think we've actually seen quite similar in like the first Doctor series, like the Mechanoids episodes. I think the conclusion to that serial. What serial was that? What serial was the Mechanoids in? The Chase. The ending of the Chase is very similar to the ending of this film. So I don't really see like the budget making that big a difference. I think, of course, the sets were far grander, larger, but in terms of looking better, I can't say they did, in my opinion. And like the ends, where like I felt it was clever, where like the Daleks destroyed the cells based on like them maneuvering the Daleks. But again, that's stuff we've seen in Dalek Invasion of Earth, the Chase. It's nothing new.
That's weird, because you were saying earlier that you liked the kind of scenes at the end, and you did think they were more majestic.
I agree. I thought they looked fantastic, but I'm saying the TV show didn't differ in quality that badly compared to it.
Okay, I see. Okay, fair enough.
When the Daleks turned around and Ian was like Daleks, and then they all turned around instantaneously and shot all the machine, I thought that's a brilliant set piece. And it's like we had this conversation, DK, with Star Trek. Weird, we're talking about Doctor Who and I mentioned Star Trek. That's weird. Usually vice versa. But we were reviewing an episode and it was like really low budget and they had to like reuse cast members and there's like a crew of 40, whereas we only saw about 5. Whereas with the Files, we saw a scene where they came into the Dalek city and there must have been 20, 25 of them. And I thought that was really impressive casting, how they could get that many people just for that one shot. I think it actually added it was decent world building. Whereas when you went into the jungle and the TARDIS and they sit around the TARDIS after like the ambush, you only see about 10 of them there. And I thought, oh, that's a bit naff. So in terms of like the production value, it differs. It's up and down, but mostly like I'm making reference to like the Daleks. No, the Dalek Invasion of Earth and the Chase, which are later serials, which are far better than the Dalek serial, which is adapted off. When we actually think of the Dalek serial, it was really, really crap. I think it's not even Terry Nation's one of his best scripts. I think it's a dismal script. And like to summarize the film, in my opinion, I know we're not there yet, but I think it can only it's an adaptation of something that wasn't very good in the first place. And like you said, Michael, it's beat for beat for a lot of it. All he did is like amazing that he took a script credit for it, because it is essentially the same story. Just like it can only be so much better. And I gave it the same score, this film, than I did to the original serial. Yes, it's better. Yes, it's got better production values, but ultimately it boils down to the same things, and that's the problem. It didn't do anything new. That's why points that stand out to me, like the ground opening up. That doesn't happen in the serial. That's something new. That's why I prefer the second half. Hopefully that makes sense.
I see. Yeah. No, I see what you mean, and I would say, because it is related to the writing, so it makes sense, absolutely. And I would say that the overall story is weak, which is way more evident when you take it into a 7-part TV show. But I do think there are parts here that are great. It's just that the whole is not greater than the sum of its parts. Like I love individual scenes and moments and things that they do, like I said, like the prison escape or escaping up the elevator or the actual arriving on Skaro and things like that. I think there are some great moments that they execute really well, but like you said, the overall plot that it's all hinging on is very much okay. Like you said, it's kind of, it was retconned by Terry Nation when he wrote Genesis of the Daleks, because as an origin it kind of isn't that good. Anyway, but would you agree or disagree, DK?
I kind of see the positives and the negatives in both. That's all I can say really on that.
Yeah. Okay. What was I going to say? So the last thing that I have about the writing that I wanted to talk about, because you kind of said Will, when we were texting back and forth as you watched, you said, "Is this the worst ending of any Doctor Who thing ever?" And I was like, "I've seen worse." It was an attempt at a joke that I think falls completely flat, especially when you've had so much silliness, and it's another just like, oh, groan. But I get why it's there in terms of how else would you end it. And
I don't think it's much of an actor issue, more of a production, because first of all, the green screen looked awful of like the the charging soldiers and whatever. I thought that was crap.
Yeah. And that's just stock footage that they stick on the front of the where the door should be, you know?
Exactly. And I think in terms of it wasn't, I'm not sure if the actor's name who played Ian.
Roy Castle, who plays Ian.
There we go. It's not his fault, because I thought for what he was given, I thought he did a fantastic job overall. Whereas he like ramped it up to 10 in the final few seconds. Whereas you just have like, the other three, and especially the Doctor, just being like senile on the fucking chair, not doing anything. So I just thought, you're not reciprocating his energy here. That's why it's a bit cringe. And
I think
is there a Back to the Future situation where it like directly leads into the next film? I don't know.
Oh no, they don't. They literally do not address it. And in the next film, only Susan returns out of the group, and that's only because Peter Cushing insisted, because he kind of was fond of Roberta Tovey. So
great,
not addressed at all. But yeah, I mean, I think it might be emblematic of the times, because it's a very 1960s thing. Like, it bugs me when watching the original Star Trek that it feels the need to end every episode on a very lame joke, as if like that's the only way to close out something. And it's like, all right, come on, man. You know? So I see what you're saying. It doesn't bother me horrendously, but it is like, ugh, okay. You could have ended on a different beat, but that's what you went with, right? As I say, without wanting to just launch into a review of the sequel, there's even worse slapstick in that, mind you. Bernard Cribbins, bless him, doing some ridiculous things in that movie.
I will be watching that. It's available on ITVX Premium. I may as well utilize it before I cancel it.
Yeah, why not? Again, it's only like under an hour and a half, so it's worth a look at least. But you will immediately spot who paid for the film, by the way, because it's hard not to see the product placement that's not very subtle in that one.
Do you prefer this one to the sequel, Mike?
Oh, I do, definitely. Yeah. Like I said, I think I did say it earlier, but I think this actually improves on the TV serial. Whereas if I was watching the second, like if I'm watching this story, I would always reach for the movie. If I'm watching the second one, I'm never reaching for that film. I'd always reach for the Dalek invasion of Earth, which I think is so superior. Yeah.
All right.
Would you disagree?
I don't know why. I've always found, even though the serial itself is far, far better, for some reason, I always, when it comes to these two movies, I always go for 2150 AD. I don't know why. I don't know if it's Bernard Cribbins. I think Louise is a far better character to Barbara in this. And
that's true.
And I think Roberta Tovey is a fantastic actress in that second one. I mean, she's all right in this, but I think she's really good in that. And when she's partnered up with Andrew Keir, when they're trying to escape from London, I think I don't know if it's because I feel more of a kinship to it, because there's there are actual locations from Earth that you kind of recognized or something, but it doesn't seem to have that lull in it to me that this one kind of does. And I can always sit down and watch that. Even that silly little scene that you were referring to a bit ago, it still makes me, I'm not going to say it makes me laugh, because it's mental, but it makes me snigger from time to time.
Yeah. Oh, well. Fair enough. Again, I don't want to get too far into it. We'll probably someday, God willing, we might be reviewing the sequel if we still have viewers by that point. But yeah. Sorry?
Let's do it.
Yeah, someday. But yeah. So did you guys have any last things just about like the writing and the overall plot?
It's very samey from the original show.
Yeah, I don't think there's much you can say. Because we're pretty
much a bit paper thin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, well. And yeah, it captured the imagination. Like, the idea of the Daleks is so well loved. And yeah, as you said, for an origin, you just think, oh, is that it? But anyway.
I do wonder. It does make me wonder what was it about them that captured the imagination? Because
to me, I think it's entirely the appearance.
It has to be, because it can't be their attitude.
No, absolutely not. No, and like you said, for even as well, there is, saying that, mind you, there is something genius about the idea of they're not robots, even though they look like it. They are creatures that have mutated to such a point that they can't live outside of these machines. You know, that is, it's not, you know, with 60, 70 years, whatever, of sci-fi, it doesn't seem like groundbreaking, but it probably was in the 60s, and it's like, oh, okay.
But even
what a cool idea.
But even then, you look at the Thals, and you know, you do have a tendency to think, my God, nuclear holocaust actually worked for some people.
Well, again, without wanting to end up having to co-credit him on this video, I think Kieran Hodgson, in his like Mickey take version of the Daleks, does say, yes, we Thals are all mutants, but handsome ones who went to RADA. And I've even written in my notes, yes, they were all cursed with the terrible mutation of blonde bowl cuts. And I think somebody in the audience response is like, so the Thals have all mutated into drag queens, essentially. You know? Like, yeah, that's
I do remember. I think the very first time I saw this, where Susan, I think, glimpses a Thal, and it's wearing it, you know, the kind of cloak.
Yes.
When I saw that, I can remember as a child being absolutely terrified of that, thinking, "What is it that
really?
she's what? Yeah, what is it?" And then when you actually see the Thals, thinking, "Oh,
oh, it was Lily Savage." Oh well. Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, again, it's of an era where sci-fi, you know, they weren't doing well. They couldn't do prosthetics and complicated things, so an alien was somebody with eyeshadow and grey face paint. The movie actually adapts really well that sense of the sci-fi-ness of it all and the futurism. And I would love to have seen this on the big screen at some point, because I think it probably works really well, but I never have, you know, obviously. But,
in the first, didn't look as bad as the actual TV show either.
Yeah. I mean, I'll get to it when we talk about the direction, but there's certainly a lot of visual stuff that I really like more in the film. So, yeah. But yeah. Do you want to lead us into a little bit of a chat about the acting, DK?
Yeah, we'll go through it. So, you know, we'll start. Cushing, what is everybody's thoughts? I mean, we've already touched upon it with regards to his affability compared to the TV version, but what did you think to his acting? So I'll start with you, Will. Go for it.
Well, it's more of a writing thing, but I like how, conversely, compared to the TV show, he's in it for most of it. He's actually like the driving force of the movie, in my opinion. Not Barbara, but him. I like how he's inquisitive. I think he portrayed that very well, even from the first moment in the lounge, where it could be a bit anticlimactic because of the reasons we've discussed with it, like the human adaptation. I think he still has the Doctor's wismic energy, and I think for the child in me, that was like really appreciated. And I don't think there's a moment in the film where I think he breaks character or anything like that, or he loses like his stride, because you always got the sense that he was endearing towards Susan or Suzy. Is she even called Susan in this film?
She is, but he calls her Suzy the entire time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he's got the endearingness that William Hartnell had sometimes towards Susan. And he also has the inquisitiveness William Hartnell had, and I think he played up to the laughs a bit more without going over the top, which I thought was appreciated. And he, like, when Ian was doing his own thing, being a bit chaotic, he just like gave like Susan a little smirk. He's like, "What the hell is he doing?" And I just noticed those little nuances in his performance, and I thought he did William Hartnell honor in his performance, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I think he brought almost like a kind of childlike awe to most things. With regards to the relationship, as you say, there was more of a kinship between him and Susan. I think they felt very much on the same level for a lot of the time. Susan's young, but she's very advanced. The Doctor, he's kind of old, but he seems very kind of childlike, very, I'm not going to say naive, but he has that sense of wonder where he's exploring.
Yeah. I've just written the word impish. I think that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? He's very, anyway, Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, you applied scientific logic to most things, so I wouldn't call it naivety. You still had the sense that he was like the super genius, and I think you raised an excellent point about Susan. I think the characterization here of Susan is far better than what the show gave her, and that's why I felt really bad for Carol and Ford, because they gave a young actress far better stuff to work with.
Yeah,
she's certainly portrayed way more. I think the TV show kind of starts to hint it might be doing this and then veers away from it. The whole idea of she's an absolute genius, on a level with Doctor Who, which as you're watching, you can it skirts the line to me of being a little close to obnoxious, because she's so young and she's like, I know best. And I was like, okay, you're very thankfully Roberta Tovey as an actress doesn't let it go over there because she's got a kind of charm to her. But
she does play precocious quite well, I think, in this.
Yes.
As I said, I do think she is. Whether she's more settled in the role, I do think she works better in 2150 AD. But I do like her as a character in this.
It is weird that because they've aged her down, they can't do the thing that the TV show does of the whole Aladon of the Thals, like kind of flirting with her and a bit of dare I say it, sexual tension there, because she's like 8 years old. So when she's supposed to have been bonding with the Thals, I did find that a little jarring, because I was like, yeah, I'm still aware of where this comes from, and because you can't do that, I'm just like, what is this weird dude doing hanging around this little girl,
Yeah, but when she did like get taken by the Daleks to go over to the to see the Thals, I did kind of get the subconscious instinct that she'd be okay, because by that point I thought she's very intelligent, she's very inquisitive, she knows what she's doing, she knows her surroundings, she's already like been into the Daleks like room, and then she nabs the pencil and chucked it into her pocket. I was like, okay, I sense that she's on the same level as the Doctor. So when she did go, I was never like worried for her, even though like the TARDIS doors opened, which I didn't realize that would happen even for a phone. It's like, yeah, I mean, a humanoid creature can turn that knob, but the TARDIS knob isn't meant to be touched, isn't meant to be open, you know what I mean? So when that happened, I was like, okay, maybe something's going to happen here, maybe he's going to take control of the TARDIS, but then thankfully none of that happens, and he wasn't threatening whatsoever.
Yeah. And what about you, Mike? We didn't really ask you about with regards to Cushing. What are your thoughts on Cushing?
No, I kind of said it all amongst the writing. Like I said, I think it's weird because I think he's not good as an adaptation of the William Hartnell Doctor, but he has elements to him that I prefer in other actors that have played the Doctor, if that made sense. So I actually really like the kind of sense that he can be a super genius, but also have that kind of childlike side. There's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes, etc. And so I love that gag that they're all reading science books and he's reading, The Eagle, probably a Dan Dare comic. And, I really like that. And I do like the kind of youthful joy and exuberance that he has at discovering new things. And it's a weird point to make, but I do think his like lie about the fluid link to keep them exploring, I forgive Cushing's Doctor a lot more easily than I do Hartnell's, where Hartnell, it seems like you recklessly put them in danger and it was stupid and you've done something dumb. With Cushing, I was like, oh, bless you. You wanted to look around and I can't blame you for your sense of wonder, Yeah.
Well, I mean, looking back, obviously, as I mentioned, he was asked to be on the TV show, but declined. Would either of you have been happy to see him in the role of the actual Doctor on the TV series? And if so, would you be happy with, say, how he portrayed him in this, or would you want a kind of different take on it?
For sure. I mean, I disagree with Michael, of course, because what I said initially was like, I thought he did capture a lot of William Hartnell's mannerisms and stuff like that. Maybe he wasn't as stern at some points, but he could have easily been written like that in the show, especially if it's the same creative team. It's a different universe. Like if you stepped on a bee, maybe he would have been the Doctor. But it's like, I would not have minded this portrayal instead of William Hartnell's, and that might be controversial, but I love both. I love William Hartnell. I wouldn't want him to be another Doctor, but if this was what we got with William Hartnell, I would not have cared.
Fair enough. Mike?
They're very similar.
Yeah. And I think weirdly, I don't know if I would like him to be the first Doctor, the first one we got, because I don't know if it necessarily would have worked. And again, I wouldn't replace William Hartnell for what he was able to do, launching that role. But weirdly, for me, he fits kind of perfectly between Hartnell and Troughton in the way that they're characterized. Like, he's a little softer and more childlike and more, filled with wonder than Hartnell was able to portray, but not quite as over the top, running around jumping and holding his bum when Cybermen are firing on him as Troughton got at times. So yeah, to me, I think he would be a great Doctor if you slot him in there between it. But I will say, I think he also needs the younger Susan to have that kind of, Penny and Inspector Gadget dynamic going on. Otherwise, he's just going to come across as a bit of a buffoon.
I do like that comparison, actually.
Yeah.
So I don't know. When I compare them side by side with Hartnell's Doctor and Cushing's Doctor always seems the more approachable. He seems like if you approached either one of them with a question, I get the impression that Hartnell, especially when it started, would just like look you up and down and just tut and call you stupid. Whereas
he does, yeah. I mean, it's like, oh, you don't understand it.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't imagine Cushing being like, oh, you fool.
Cushing would try and answer your question. He'd probably forget what it was halfway through, but he'd have a go.
Yeah, very absent-minded professor. But like I said, just to emphasize, I do think it that is also a function of who he's got to act with, because for whatever reason, it does feel like even though Barbara is now his granddaughter, unlike in the TV show, she might as well not be, because he's giving all of his affection and all of his time is spent with Susan. Like, she's clearly a favorite.
I mean, personally, no respect to Jenny Linden. I mean, she did okay with what she had, but I'm not trying to be, as I say, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but for a lot of the film, she might as well not have been there.
She was wallpaper.
Well, I've said that from the start. Yeah, I mean, it was a nothing role, and it's not her fault. It's just that character wasn't written with anything to do. Like I said, the fact she was changed from being a random school teacher to being Doctor Who's granddaughter had no bearing on anything. It was just a plot device to introduce Ian, because he couldn't really be the boyfriend that was coming to date an 8-year-old. So you needed somebody older then.
Yeah. Barbara in the actual television serial, wasn't she like more involved with Susan, like looking after her and stuff like that, looking out for her? So
well, she was that school teacher figure, wasn't she? So she was looking after what she never quite, even though she was ahead of her year, Susan, she never quite shook that parental maternal kind of thing, I think, in the serial, where you just didn't get that because they were just sisters.
Yeah. But even then, it's like the oldest sibling has got to be kind of protective. And then I get that she has a love interest, but blood goes thicker than that. And I got no sense that they were siblings other than like the opening bit where I was like more perplexed as to why she wasn't a teacher.
But even then, with regards to the love interest, I didn't see any kind of chemistry as such between Roy Castle's character as Ian and Barbara.
No, like I said, it was just because you needed an excuse to have him there. And how else would you introduce just this random bloke? I mean, you're going to say that the Doctor Who now suddenly has 2 granddaughters and a grandson? At a certain point, it gets silly,
Yeah. I mean, what did you think of Roy Castle's performance then?
Weird, because I love Roy Castle as a person and as an entertainer. And like you, I grew up watching him on Record Breakers. And so I know him more as light entertainment TV show host kind of thing. So it's hard to kind of come up with a modern day comparison of like seeing somebody in this role. It would be the equivalent of, I don't know, Alan Carr or somebody turning up as the Doctor. Peter Kay, I don't know, somebody that's known, but not somebody who hosts like game shows. I don't know, Michael McIntyre or weirdly John Barrowman, I guess, I don't know, suddenly being a companion. But so for me, like I said, this isn't a judgment on him as a person or as an actor. And he was obviously hired because he was that light entertainer, Sunday night at the Palladium type guy. But he just grates on me in this film because he's playing the buffoon. And it's so like that whole business at the start where they waste a solid 5 minutes on he's got to sit on the chair and then run to the door and everything. And I'm like, this is awful. What are you doing? What's this for?
Oh man! No, but that like gave you like a natural segue into like showing him the gizmo, and they wasted no time in getting to the TARDIS.
No, but I want about when they get to Skaro and you've got the automatic doors, but you have to sit on the chair, and the door opens, and like he does this whole knockabout slapstick, like sit on the chair, up, run and try and catch it, up, sit, up, run. And I was like, find something heavy, put it on the chair. It doesn't take a genius for crying out loud.
I think again, it's that kind of childlike aspect. There's only one kind of child character in this, and obviously they can hold their own with any adult in the room, perhaps more. So you've got to have that kind of character that a child can identify with, and I think he plays that one quite well. It might not work in terms of adult logic, but I think it gives something a kid, and especially me as a kid, because as you said, we did watch him on Record Breakers, someone to latch onto, if that makes any sense.
I think that's the thing. I think it will depend when you've seen the film as well, because you probably saw it as a child. And like I said, I was probably 15. So as a 15-year-old first watching this, I'm just thinking, I'm just
picturing you as like Kevin from Kevin and Perry now, mate.
I was never that even remotely cool, believe me. It's more like Will from the In-Betweeners, to be honest.
Here's the thing with Mike. I do agree with Mike in terms of I do think his performance can be a little bit grating, but that's mostly due to the writing. Like there's some brilliant moments where he's far more toned down than by the end when the slapstick comes back in when he walks into the TARDIS door. I thought that was hilarious. And then 1 minute later, you just have him prancing around the TARDIS for the materialization. I thought, okay, now you're going back into absurdity. So it's like a fine line that they never quite got. However, I think we criticize him more and his characterization more because of the affinity we have with the Ian we know in the TV show, which is not like Ian in the film. So we see him more negatively, whereas from DK's perspective, I can understand far more from like a more neutral perspective. It is something for the children. It is light relief. And I think this is the question you ask at the end. What's your favorite character? He is my favorite character just because if you actually think of everyone, who's the most memorable? Yes, you have Peter Cushing playing the Doctor. Of course, that's going to be memorable. And you got Susan, who's like the intelligent one, but does she really have that great moment? Whereas I do think Ian is given those moments, and I think the performance merely complements that. And, he executes what he was given really well. So he's the most memorable. He's my favorite character. So props to him, even though I do agree with Michael. I think that's down to the writing, though.
Completely. I'm not criticizing him. He's doing what he was hired to do and what he's written to do, which is you're here to be the comic relief and to be the entertainer clown character that the kids will be able to laugh at and have a bit of fun. But I just don't know if my ideal version of this story needs that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And what about going a bit further afield? Barry Ingham as Aladon.
Gotta get a picture.
I have very little to say except that he looked like an alien that you would see from a porn parody. And
they are a pretty bunch of people, aren't they?
I've got a question because I just thought of something. You know the bit where Ian goes to the water and then he looks into the water and he sees something underneath the water?
Yeah.
I swear that's a scene from the TV show, but he sees like eyes or something under the water. But then I'm thinking about what the film did. It was like something's in that puddle over there. And then the other guy was like, but look in this puddle, there's some pipes. And I thought, what did Ian just see? Is that ever explained? What did Ian actually...
It was supposed to be, as DK said in the behind the scenes, it was meant to be a monster, but they couldn't afford it or it just didn't look right. So now the guy gets killed. The camera cuts away to like, oh, look at these pipes. And then off screen, the guy screams. And it's like, oh, that horrifying monster that you didn't see killed him.
I swear in the TV show, you actually do see like the eyes emerge from the water. Or at least...
I can't remember, but you may be thinking of the Slither from Dalek Invasion of Earth, though.
Perhaps. No, I'm not. No.
I don't remember, but again, it's been a while since I saw all of the original serial, so maybe.
Yeah. Finish the Conan Bacon and Sylvester McCoy stuff, then go back.
I'll be watching the colorization, won't I, soon? So.
Well, yeah. After this episode comes out, in fact.
Yeah, immediately after this,
Indeed.
Man. Yeah.
Yep.
We're recording this late.
Yep.
So, yeah, do either of you have anything else to add with regards to the acting? Anybody that you think we've missed out?
No, I've said all my bits. That was literally, I've touched on every one of my notes.
Yeah.
I know your favourite character is the guy that, cut himself free of the rope now. So
It's so silly. It's so emblematic of so why include that scene if you're just going to be like, oh, I'm all right after all?
It disengaged me.
Unintentionally comedic.
I just went onto Discord messaging Mike, and I was like, I wasn't even paying attention for the minute after that.
So yeah, that's acting done. What are we on next?
Oh, I'll move us to the direction then. Why not?
Go for it.
Yeah, obviously the director of this was Gordon Fleming, who, if you don't know, is the father, or was the father, he's passed away, R.I.P., but he was the father of the actor Jason Fleming, who you will almost certainly have seen in something. He's often turning up in Guy Ritchie movies. He was in the abysmal League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie. He was in X-Men First Class. I think he's been in a couple of other Matthew Vaughn stuff. And he has done interviews about these films, because obviously he's aware he was around as a kid when his father was directing them, so he knows bits and pieces, and you can find him talking about parts of the film. In terms of directing overall, we've mentioned already, I think the film makes great use of the fact that it is Technicolor. And the scenes I was going to kind of touch on earlier, I think it's nice it adds to the alien feel whilst also looking kind of pretty and aesthetically nice when they arrive on Skaro and everything has this green wash over it. And I was like, ooh, that's a nice touch. The TV show couldn't really, in black and white, you can't do that. I mean, they try something similar with the Web Planet and the whole Vaseline on the lens to make it look alien, and it does not work at all. So, yeah.
It was an opinion you didn't have until last year, until you rewatched it. Before then, you thought,
I know. I mean, I like the cereal, but that as an idea, make it look alien by smearing Vaseline doesn't work. And I said, using lights to do that, to give everything its own color and its own place, I really liked. And then as I said, when you get into the Dalek city, the pink tones and everything, they actually stand out. They look they look lived in rather than like sets. And like I said, a lot of them remind me of Forbidden Planet and movies of that era in America, where they already had full color movies and stuff going on.
I mean, I completely agree. I love the mundane, sickly green aesthetic of the forest. The higher up the tree you went, the more dark green. Well, I don't even know if it was dark. It was just a weird kind of lime.
Well, it wasn't just that it was green. I was curious why, because I was like, it's got a green wash, but is there something else? And when I watched the little documentary thing, apparently it was achieved because they filmed the scenes without the anamorphic widescreen lens on the camera. So it kind of is a little bit as if you're looking slightly out of focus, I guess. It gives it that weird otherworldly quality.
Maybe that's the reason why I think the blue screen worked more effective in this, because perhaps the background was a little bit more blurred, so it took your attention away from the obvious fact that in the TV show it would have been a green screen, whereas I got the sense that it was a blue screen in this just because of how it looked. It looked a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I thought, for the most part, that was really effective. You obviously realize it's a set and not a planet, of course.
Yeah.
They can have.
In terms of the background, I will say there's a gorgeous matte painting where it's the moon, just hanging in the sky behind them, and it looks it's gorgeous. I love anything like that. As a Star Trek fan, of course I do, but I love atmospheric things that are clearly just a painting that they've stuck to the back of the studio.
Yeah. And I do like as well how they made it a bit more three-dimensional. Before the big reveal of the city, you could kind of glimpse through the trees foliage, and you could see a little bit of the city. I thought that was fantastic for just setting the scene, the surroundings of where you are. We knew that city was there somewhere, whereas in the TV show you wouldn't have been able to see it. Whereas in this,
I can remember being very underwhelmed the first time I saw the TV episode, because it's so clearly a model city. It's just I mean, obviously it is, but with a film budget, it was a set and it was there. So I think you're right. They make the most of that.
Yeah, the set didn't exist just for the twist. You could actually see it beforehand, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say as well, in terms of the director's style, I did think there was maybe one too many zoom in on somebody's face as they are in perceived peril and somebody shouts, "Be careful!" But again, I think that was more the way filmmaking was in the 60s, especially for this kind of what would be regarded as a kind of family high adventure film. One other interesting moment that I noticed was when the Dalek that's commanding, the red one, is talking at a later point in the film. He's very specifically filmed as if the camera's on the floor looking up to presumably give him some menace. And I was like, that is really, it's genius, but it's very noticeable that you're not on the same level. You're looking upwards like that. And I thought that was worth mentioning. Again, I like the fact that you don't have to use cardboard cutouts like Power of the Daleks, and you can actually show an army of Daleks converging, and the camera makes the most of it with the wide shots and everything. And like, why not? You've got the props. And the shots of the two armies clashing, I think they're able to do a lot more with. And that adds so much to the tension, especially with the whole, like, 3 seconds left, it's my lucky number business and everything. Yeah. So, yeah, DK, any thoughts from you about the direction? Because I think I've rambled through all of mine.
There were a couple of sections. You mentioned it before with the, I don't know if it was you or Will, with regards to Ian in the casing and the Daleks are burning through the door.
Towards me.
I think it's directed and edited well, so it does actually ramp up the tension. And there's the scene later on where they're in the lift, in the little elevator, and the Daleks firing. And I think the use of the angles that Fleming uses in that is very effective.
Yeah, because I think thinking about it now, there's like an aerial shot of like the smoke coming through the floor. Then it's only like holds on that for like a second or two. Then you cut straight to angle from the floor upwards, where you can see like the smoke dispersing and the reactions of the characters. Which good point.
I think those two. When it comes to the action set pieces, I think Fleming does very well in this.
Agreed.
There was a moment where I thought the direction was bad. Even the bit where you cut the rope and like landed on that ledge, it still looked good.
Yeah.
Michael disagrees.
No, I agree. I'm not saying anything because I agree, so there's nothing else to add.
Yeah. I mean, I know criticisms of the directing.
Yeah. No, I have no criticisms. Again, it's not the director's fault, but I did notice, which I found kind of amusing, that in the one scene where they kind of lasso the Dalek down the lift shaft, the Dalek's dome light just pops off before it falls. Because obviously, I mean, the Dalek props, bless them, they're not the most sturdy things. And I can imagine it was a nightmare to try and keep them together at the best of times. But because it's like, you know, being propelled backwards and it's about to do a huge drop, like, it's just funny watching the dome light just pop off it. I was like, I'm so glad they kept that in, because it was funnier than anything Roy Castle did for me in the movie. So do you guys have any other thoughts on direction, or like, we haven't touched on it, but like VFX, special effects or sets, things like that?
I don't really. I mean, I did think it is kind of combined, the production design and the sets and stuff like that. And it is, again, it's something that we said, it's very much of its time. It's very 60s. It's very much awash with, color. It's something that it is, as you say, a bit Forbidden Planet. It's not that what they would do these days, but I just think it still looks good. For if you take into account that it's very much of its time, to me it still looks really good. And when you compare it, I know, again, no disrespect to the original serial because you're working on a BBC budget, but this does look very nice. There are certain things that I could go, where they do that matte painting of the pipes and stuff like that. But by that point, I'm usually half asleep anyway, so I don't really notice.
Yeah, I don't think anything's as bad as, like Will said, ironically, that last shot where it's just obvious stock footage of an old Roman movie or whatever.
That is pretty terrible. I mean, the angles don't match up at all.
I know. Yeah, I know.
You have to be buried up to the halfway point at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, not great. But yeah, I mean, the only other thing I've said is that I really liked the idea, whoever had it, of the cameras in the Skaro city just being Dalek eye stalks. And I was like, oh, I appreciate that little attention to detail. It's quite clever. And it adds a bit of menace to it. You're feeling like it's their eyes looking at you. What was that?
They turned slightly as the characters moved, but they didn't turn all the way. But it was still as if they were watching them. Right? Yeah. But it was like the transition afterwards, away from that scene, where you had like a cut and like one of the cameras turned directly into the lens of the camera, and then it kind of did like a circular like fade out, and I thought that was pretty good in terms of transition, because I can't recall this movie having many like transitions that classic Doctor Who typically had. Like they had fancy transitions at points.
Yeah. Well, there's no like George Lucas star wipes or anything because it's not that kind of Fleming isn't that kind of director. But yeah, exactly. It it helps add a bit more of a layer of seriousness not having that. So last thing then before we go to music and sound, which we haven't touched on, what do you guys think of this particular interior for TARDIS? Not good, is it?
You don't even have like a main console really. It's just like
nope.
It's all the different components to fly the TARDIS are in like different parts of the console room, which I thought was naff. It's like just like another laboratory of his, but well, it is. Wait, no. In first light, there's a laboratory at their home. You know when like the fluid link is broken, it said, "Oh, it's in my laboratory," which is at home. Because I thought maybe like the TARDIS was the laboratory, but they had the TARDIS, so that wouldn't be a thing. It's meant to look like an extension of his lab, which as a space time machine does not work. Where's the Bunsen burner?
Yeah, to me it just looked like my dad's shed. Like it was just all clutter and nonsense. And even when, like you said, you were supposed to be looking at it as potential components. I mean, the TARDIS starts flying because Ian knocks a ladder, which is inexplicably in there for no reason. And when they get to where the fluid link is, it's so obviously just a bit of, a couple of 2x4s with some little vials just duct taped to it or something. It doesn't look convincing at all. And I was like, oh, they haven't tried with this, bless them. So yes, but it's definitely my least favorite TARDIS interior. What about you, DK? How do you feel?
Well, I mean, we had this discussion the other day. I've got a kind of affection for it. It's the, as you say, it's the worst TARDIS interior ever. But I still kind of grew up on it in those formative years, and it reminded me of my spare room. So it was excellent for pretending the spare room was a TARDIS.
I would imagine a lot of people probably did imagine that their dad's shed was like it, because like I said, the way that it was cluttered and just a couple of deck chairs and a ladder or whatever. So yeah,
maybe that's the aesthetic that they were going for.
Probably. If you think about it, yeah, maybe. But to me, it just doesn't really work because it's a space-time machine. It just feels a bit like, huh. But like you say, if it's appealing to kids and the idea was just, kids can copy it by walking down the garden, maybe that was the point. So anyway, so DK, do you want to lead us in and talk about the sort of the music and the sound? Because I don't have much to say, but you might touch on some of it anyway.
I don't really. I mean, I've not really got anything on that, actually.
Fair enough. No. Well, I will quickly note that the electronic music is by the famous Barry Gray, who you will know he was Jerry Anderson's regular contributor. So he made like the famous theme from Thunderbirds, for example, and things like that. And it's a very swinging 60s, especially the main theme to this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in then and say we're going to go around. Will, you've already basically told us this, so you may as well start us off if it's anything you haven't said. But Will, who is your favourite character? Who could it be?
I think it was Barbara.
Understandable. She makes an impact. Yeah,
she did. I'm not changing my answer.
We know it was really Ian.
It was.
You already said it.
Yeah.
You can't fool us with your trickery. So yeah, DK, who was your favourite character then?
It's another one for Ian. Even
okay.
years before I saw the original, I was a fan of this version. I grew up watching Roy Castle in Record Breakers, so there was someone there, no matter how goofy, that I could latch onto. I think he's got decent comic timing. I mean, Roy Castle were always good, and it comes through in this. Yeah, he's a bit of an idiot, but he's out of his element, but God help me, I love him.
Fair enough. I'm going to have to be the only one to be different then, because I said my favourite character was actually Susan, because she gets to be more serious than Doctor Who or Ian, but she also actually gets to do something, unlike Barbara. So I was like, I could imagine if I'd watched this at a younger age, she probably would be the character I would have identified most with. Yeah, she's the hero of the story for me. So, Will, back to you. What was your favourite moment or scene in the film?
You're gonna hate me because it is a one-liner. It's a one-worder actually. It's when Barbara says, "Hey, Dalek," and the Dalek goes, "Yes," and then she absolutely splats with some food. That's my favorite line.
Yeah, good.
Just years.
So that's your favorite moment and line, is that?
That is my favorite moment and line. Yes.
Okay.
I was like,
we'll
we'll
just ask for your
one word as my favorite line.
No, it's fine. I understand. So, DK, what about you? What's your favorite moment? First of all, we'll go around in order.
Favorite moment, the climax, Dalek control room. Yeah, it looks dated, but back when I was a kid, to see the absolute chaos on screen and seeing them in color, phenomenal. Remastered version, even more so. I can only imagine, as you said earlier, how good this would look on a cinema screen. So, yeah, going for that.
I can definitely see why you went with that. I said my favorite moment was the, as I've kind of alluded to, was the elevator escape scene, because even now, having seen this a lot of times, I still think that it's a masterclass in how you do tension and how you make it seem threatening, and it's just a really cool, adventurous scene to watch as well. So I went with that if I had to pick a scene. There are others. I mean, I like like I said, the jail escape moment that leads up to that, and I do love the, like I said, when the Daleks all come pouring in and you're like, oh, wow, there's actually more than 3 Daleks on screen. Yeah. It's pretty good. So, yeah. Okay. And Will, so your favourite line, which we'll drop in now, was?
Yes.
What was your favourite line in the film?
I've got 2 and I'm not sure which to go with, if I'm being honest.
Just pick both. Will only picked one word.
Come on, do something.
All right. The first one is, the last war destroyed almost everything on this planet. Left it like this. We do not want another, which I think is always a good thing to say. And then I just like Susan's description of the TARDIS. An electroconnective theory, space expands to accommodate the time necessary to incorporate its dimensions. Complete bollocks, but it just gets you past that section.
It's nonsense. Anyway. Yeah, my favorite line was, because I like the kind of impact and the potential that it kind of hints at, is simply, if they called us monsters, what must they be like? Because I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. So, yeah. So, DK, you have the audience response for this one. So, over to you. What did the audience think of Doctor Who and the Daleks?
Yeah, well, we had quite a few on this one. So I'll go through where they're from. Over on Shitter, Kenneth M. Sweeney says, here's something weird about this movie. I remember Weetabix doing a promotion on this with cardboard cutouts she could play with in the 1980s. I can't remember that, but I'm going to be headed to eBay. Boxlog says it's a full Dalek banger. So, yeah, I'm guessing he likes it in that vernacular. On your Threads account, Nerdy Ham says 4 out of 5 stars. It's better than the serial it's based on. Susan is written so much more effectively than in the main show, and the Daleks and set pieces are amazing. Now, over on the Classic Whovian group, Boris Stoyanov says 5 stars. On Daleks Rule Supreme, Nobba Wilson.
These are on Facebook, by the way, yeah?
Yeah, Nobba Wilson, love that name, says, love the colour schemes for the Daleks in the first movie. What lets the first film down are the slow, monotone voices the Daleks have, and the ridiculously camp Thals. They all look like drag queens. Bess Ravenwood says, I love the films, the best Daleks ever. Max Drebin says 4 stars. Again, on Facebook, sticking with Facebook, this time the Nerdy Up North community. John Wright says, it was actually the first Who I'd ever seen. I instantly fell in love with it and remember watching this and Doctor Who Invasion 2150 AD with Cribbins. Glenn Saville says, I love this movie. Dalek20 says, Roy Castle is the best companion. So, yeah, fair enough. Dalekmania fans on Facebook again says, yeah, it's cool. They're showing it on the BBC4 on the 23rd, so we'll definitely be watching it.
I think he was confused about that, and I think he's actually thinking of the colorized version of the serial. Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Again, from Daleks Rule Supreme, James Curran says, retrovision or hindsight is a wonderful thing, but to a kid in the 1960s, in brackets me, at 10 years old, who had only until then ever seen a Dalek in black and white, this movie was brilliant. As for the Thals looking like drag queens, most kids back then wouldn't have understood or cared less. The Doctor Who 1963 to 2023 group on Facebook, Tim Moon says it's enjoyable in many ways, though hard to get over its lack of links to the TV version. Cushing is a great Doctor, but that TARDIS interior is awful. I think we're going to have to disagree there, Tim. Yeah, again on your threads, Jen Gregory says, finally saw both on the big screen last year. They're both fantastic films, in my humble opinion. Watched them so much as a kid. Again, Nerdy Up North community says, I saw both of the Cushing movies in the 70s as a pre-teen and thought they were both great romps. As an adult, they still have their charm despite the cheap effects and oft comedic acting. A solid 4, they did what they intended to do. Sticking with
That was
Facebook.
the main Nerdy Up North account, was it, sorry?
Yeah, that was the Nerdy Up North. On the Doctor Who BBC group, Mark Van Helsing says, in my opinion, Peter Cushing would have made a brilliant first Doctor if he ever was given the role. And he also said that's an awesome movie poster for the Daleks. And we had one on the Silver Screen group, which was Glenn Brooks. He says, a part of my childhood, I loved them both. And that's it for audience feedback this time.
Awesome. So, yeah, I mean, for the first time in a while, I think universal love. I don't think anybody really had anything super critical to say about that. So, interesting. And, yeah, it's always nice to see that people are still getting joy out of it. But we have to give our, film critic analysis style conclusions and scores. So, Will, as the guest, we're going to come to you first for your probably one-word review. What's your conclusion and your score?
Solid 2.0. Will I get flamed for that? I literally don't have.
You're going to give it.
I don't have a conclusion written down. Otherwise, I've like said my summary earlier in terms of like, yes, there are moments like what you said, Michael. There are moments where it's like really impressive use of the budget and stuff like that. The skyline's fantastic. There's moments where the ground opens up, and I think, yes, this is something to latch onto. This is like piquing my interest. Whereas, like I said before, in my summary halfway through, the source material is not good, and it is literally a blatant copy of the source material with the odd exception. And of course, better pacing. So I would, like Michael, choose to watch this over the original serial, which suggests that it's better, but it's not, in my opinion. It's just a case of it's shorter. So naturally, you're going to watch the shorter version of something of the same quality. And it's in color, so I guess it makes it a bit easier. There's pros and cons to it. For example, the Daleks aren't as menacing, in my opinion, in this, as partly due to the just the blowy jet wash you like spray onto a car coming out of a Dalek laser, whereas the sets and stuff are undeniably superior to the television show. So it's a really mixed bag. I did enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. I saw one Letterboxd review said it's awful, but I love it, and that's how I kind of conclude as well. It's a 2.5 out of 5 for me, middle of the road, and it's got the same rating as the original serial, even though it doesn't have 1.5 serials of them just jumping over the cavern, like crevice or whatever the hell you call it. So yeah. Mixed bag.
Okay, so DK, then over to you for your opinion and your score of 5.
It brings back so many memories in sitting in front of the TV as a kid and watching this repeatedly. Even when it wasn't on TV, it was one of those you used to rent from the video store every so often. It was practically on a loop. Looking at it with today's eyes, though, beautiful as it is, it doesn't quite hold up. It's very much of its time. So, obviously with all that entails. And it has its fair share of pacing issues, with a lull during Act 2 that, if not careful, can trigger narcolepsy. I'll be honest, I'm one of those that prefers the sequel. In my opinion, it's staged much better and has a lot more action. Plus, as much as I love Roy Castle, Bernard Cribbins, dude. Having said that, I still have a great fondness for this one. It's bright, it's colourful, it shows what you can do with a concept when you have a budget. I mean, yeah, now it looks dated, but back in the day. I do like Cushing's interpretation of the character. The supporting cast, Roberta Tovey especially, is decent enough, and it's just a romp. Well, as much of a romp as a nuclear wasteland can be. It's no longer something I can watch on a loop, so it doesn't hold up as well as it could have, but I still have those fond memories of it. Rose-tinted spectacles and all. And I'm now tempted to look up those further adventure books, so that's something. Regardless, Cushing made a good Doctor, and it's just a shame we never got much more out of him to see him grow. I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5.
Okay, and you will be looking for those Weetabix cards.
Those Weetabix cards and those continuing adventures books. I'm all up for that.
Awesome. That's fair enough. So, my conclusion then, I just said I hadn't quite remembered just how slavishly this copies the plot of the TV serial, although the fact that it condenses 7 25-minute episodes into under 90 minutes, telling the exact same story, really shows how overblown and plodding that initial serial is. As a result, I'd say I probably find this movie a little bit more enjoyable, certainly a much easier rewatch. As well as being breezier, there is some cheeky, quirky comedy courtesy of Roy Castle that does up the sense of fun, if you like that kind of thing. On the negative side, the characters are understandably barely developed, especially when compared to the regulars of a TV show. I'll also never understand the need for seemingly perfunctory changes like the human Doctor Who and his 2 granddaughters. But worst of all are the voices of the Daleks, who seem to think that you must pronounce every syllable slowly and robotically. Yeah, I don't love that. We know the reasons why, but it's still great at times. There's also random flashing lights on Daleks, which we've mentioned, who aren't talking. And I personally still much prefer the TV show Dalek designs, I would say, overall. Sorry not to disagree, DK. There's a nice sort of colourful 50s and 60s sci-fi movie feel, though, and very definite charm. As a final thought, I'm not sure if the film, enjoyable as it is, justifies existing when it's such a close copy of something else. But having said that, it does improve on it in some places. It's fun, but I wouldn't call it essential viewing. And I also gave it 3.5 out of 5, DK. So adding those scores together, we'll add them together. We divide it by 3, which gives Doctor Who and the Daleks a final score of 3.16. out of 5. So
3 stars.
Yeah, I mean, not that bad. I mean, it's one of the lower scores we've had for a while, I think, but certainly not bad. And as I said, I think you can get the impression there. Worth a look. Don't go out of your way, maybe, to go and see it. So
I think even fans of it, can admit that it's not the best movie out there, as Will said. But
yeah,
I think it's more a nostalgia trip than anything else. But it's still a decent way to pass an hour and a half on an afternoon.
And it's made me want to.
I think it's also well, that's something, I guess. But yeah, I think it's also, like you said, because it is a film that's almost 60 years old now. The generation that grew up with much faster paced films that can do a lot more. This is never going to be like, oh wow, look what the amazing things we can do, because we can do better things with a cheap kids TV show half of the time. But again, it's hard to judge out of context. So I like it. I think it's really good, and I would chuck it on, like I said, any time and enjoy watching it like we used to on the old bank holidays and things. So I think that's going to do it for us here. So as I say, if you're listening to us live or watching us on YouTube, you'll be able to flick over pretty much now to BBC4 and catch the colorized cut down version of the original Daleks serial to see how it compares. And do still keep enjoying the 60th anniversary celebrations of Doctor Who, a show we are all very fond of. You can wait until Saturday to see the first of the 60th anniversary specials, where Doctor Who will encounter Beep the Meep, or the Doctor, I should say, will. So if you have any comments, thoughts, or feelings, or you would be interested in being a guest on the show, feel free to drop us a line at any of our socials, which you can find in the description, or leave a comment on this video. And that's just about it. You can find us you can find me on most social medias. If you can find DK on there, congratulations. It's very much a Where's Wally situation. But But yeah. So DK, did you have anything you wanted to shout out where people can find you incidentally?
Nah.
Letterboxd.
What was that, Will?
Letterboxd. It's in the description.
Yeah, you'll find mine and DK's letterbox, and I'll put any links that Will wants to pass on. But Will, did you want to shout anything out quickly where people can find you?
Yeah, so what you can do now is you can either watch the colorization of the Daleks, or you could go to the Will Templar YouTube channel and do me a favor and just watch all my content. That'd be fantastic if you did. And also, if you care about my fucking film opinions, Letterboxd link will probably be in the description, unless my content.
Oh yeah, if you pass it on, for sure, yeah.
What do you mean if I pass it on? You follow me, you can get it.
That's true. I probably could, but I'm lazy. No, I will. I'll do it.
You've been listening to the Hit or Miss Doctor Who podcast, part of the Hit or Miss Who Trek channel. Hit or Miss Doctor Who is hosted by Mike Wilson and DK. Behind the scenes and additional material by DK, scripted, produced, and edited by Mike Wilson. adapted from an original podcast created by Will Templar. Follow us on YouTube, your podcatcher of choice, and our social media. Links to all of these can be found by clicking on the link tree in the episode descriptions. This podcast is a Media Matters original production. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast through all of time and space. We'll be back for another thrilling TARDIS trip soon, but for now, Doctor, I let you go.